Well. Hello, what's up?
Okay, so I have a. Okay, I don't know if you're like seeing my stream right now. Like, I have like a really like big logic chart or whatever. So if you need to like have it open or whatever, like then
Don't
you can
forget
see
to
like where
tell
I'm coming
Pixie
from.
she is white.
But so I wanted to like approach this from a different angle because I feel like I did not do a very good job last time, like at how highlighting like where I'm thinking or like where I'm coming from. So I was thinking about like just like trying to like walk through
Destiny
my
stopped
logic with you
role-playing
and like
Biden on
see
Twitter.
like where if you
Plus, you're
disagree with
white
any of my
duckersy.
premises or conclusions or anything like that.
Yep, yeah, I said okay.
Okay, give me one little second. Apparently I put you super duper loud. Um so let's start here. When it comes to media, like media representation like impacts people's lives incredibly. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Agree.
Okay, so like arguments or views presented in reality can like fuel people's hopes or dreams, right? So like representation, what happens like with what people see in the media can fuel like a person's own perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Then I just want to go over like some facts about rape. So we know that like for every 1,000 rapes, like 384 reported to the police. So like over like 60% of like rapes aren't reported, and only like 0.6% of rapes like end up in jail in the United States. I don't know about globally. I'm talking about the U.S. specific. So let's do. And then false rape accusations are usually like very small. They're like 2% to 10%, and this number like can be pretty inflated anyways. Because
all of these numbers are highly suspect. It's hard to know how many rapes actually exist, right? These are just like best guesses on everything. That's true of both false rape accusations and actual rapes committed. Like we don't really know. We just make our best guess, right?
Yeah. Okay, so cool. So let me start with the whole thing. So rape in general is like incredibly different to prosecute, right? And that's like there's a couple of reasons for this. It's a crime that usually like there's a lack of evidence to leave behind. It can like be kind of boiled down to like, oh, he said, she said a lot of times. And then in addition to that, like a lot of victims don't report their experiences, right? Like a lot of victims don't actually go to the police like with what they feel or with what happened. And there's a couple of reasons for this. Sometimes it can be like a result of trauma. The person's in denial. They feel shame of what's happened. They try to like avoid thinking about the situation. So that makes them not want to come out.
Yeah, I agree with the third thing. The other two I think are not true. So
Which
lack
one?
of evidence, rape is probably in some cases some of the easiest evidence to acquire. And then in terms of he said, she said, for rape, not at all. Like especially if there's like penile penetration, like these are some of the easiest things to collect evidence for. The third part is typically the reason why it's the most difficult is because victims don't report their experiences. So for instance, if I murder somebody, if I shoot somebody with a gun, if you find a bullet in somebody, that doesn't mean much. But if you find my semen in somebody, that means a lot, right? So the evidence is actually like pretty hardcore for rape, but the problem is reporting it in time and like getting a rape kit done early on. But like past that, of course, everything becomes very difficult. Yeah.
I mean, I was under the impression that one of the reasons why it's very difficult to prosecute rape is because even if you do like get evidence of like semen or anything like that, the person could just claim like, oh no, like it was consensual. Like I don't like.
Oh sure. In terms of evidence of like, does the person believe they committed a crime or was it consensual? Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I would acknowledge that. Sure.
Yeah.
That's
so like
unique,
that's
right?
where I'm coming from. Like,
Sure. Okay.
That's what I mean
Gotcha.
by lack of evidence.
Sure.
So and then so victims don't report why like we already went over like the trauma reasons, and now like we're gonna like rape culture, right? So rape culture can like usually be, and this is like a very like small like version. It usually ends up with like either the victim being blamed, so like, oh, like what were they wearing? What were they doing out alone? Like what signals did they give out? Or the victim not being believed. So usually that goes to like, oh no, they're just like faking it for the attention. They probably said yes and just like regretted it later. Like, why didn't they come out sooner? Or the one that like we were talking about yesterday, like, oh, X would never do that because they're a good person. And then what I want to say is that sometimes rape is about power, and that's how you get like huge like repeated offenders, because like that's their fucking high that they get off, right? Exerting that power over another. but it could also be about like entitlement or not respecting boundaries, not necessarily 100% power. That's why not all rapists are serial, and that's why something like date rape exists. So this whole idea that like, you know, the person isn't just like maliciously like rubbing their hands like a fucking villain, but constantly like pushing a person's boundaries until the person like gives up, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go as far to say that like certain abusers like know that public perception works in their favor when it comes to shielding them from consequence. So this ends with either like people trying to influence this public perception by getting into positions of power or by acting like very charming. So for example, you have like priests who get into like the position of priests so they can like continue like being pedophiles, or like notoriously like throughout history you've had like serial killers like Ted Bundy just try to have like a very charming persona or mask, so they like, you know, so people would fall more victim to them easier.
Okay.
And it's like harder to believe that, oh, this guy would actually do all that stuff. So this is where I'm coming from. This is why articles that are published that focus on how many people did not have that experience with said person or think this person is good is harmful, because not all rapists are serial, and women don't know if their rapist is serial or not. So it discourages them from coming forward due to the fear of being the only one. Not to mention abusers utilize like public perception to shield themselves. So claiming Reade is probably lying because more people haven't stepped up, and so many people haven't had that experience with Biden, can further discourage women from breaking out their stories because they do not know if a rapist is serial or not, and are afraid of being called liars if no one else steps up. So this is where I would put like a side note. So you can claim that people would be more credible, that Reade would be more credible if like more women step forward, because it's like, okay, two people's word against like one or three or four or whatever. But there's a big difference between like claiming like, oh no, like I would want like a higher level of credibility with, oh, she's lying. So
sure. Would you grant that in the opposite too then? That if somebody had raped like 5 or 6 or 7 people, that doesn't mean that they necessarily raped the 7th one that came out with an accusation. You shouldn't use the fact that they raped multiple times in the past to prove that?
So that's like really hard for me to say. I'm not sure. I think like, yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean like they raped the 7th person, but okay. I would argue like the probability becomes higher.
You can't say that though and say we shouldn't take into account like the other thing then. This is like an all or nothing, I think. I don't think you can say like, well, the probability would be higher there, but it wouldn't be lower if like tons of people had worked with them and they hadn't done anything with them, right?
Well, no, because as like we like established previously, like not all rapists are serial rapists, not all rapists
and not all serial rapists that rape 5 people rape 6 people, right? Like, it seems like you either have to determine, like, just because somebody's raped 5 people doesn't mean he's raped 6 people, right? Like, it seems like we have to figure, like, can their interactions with other people be used to determine the likelihood of another interaction, yes or no? And that seems to be, like, we can't say, well, if they were positively raping other people, then that is taken into account. But if they never raped another person or that's never been reported, then that can't be taken into account. Like, it seems like we either have to say, okay, sure, it can be, or no, it shouldn't be. I don't think that's, like, a huge part, but, like, I think that's...
Okay, I'll grant you that one for now, and then, like, if I think about it more later or something, or if I have, like, something I feel, like, very strongly about it, I'll bring it up then.
Sure.
But yeah, so this is why, like, I would claim, like, what you were, like, kind of, like, laughing about before, of, like, okay, the position, like, yeah, Schrodinger is, like, rapist or whatever, because my whole, like, where I'm coming from is this whole idea that, like, women see themselves, or a lot of women who have been like raped can see like their position or their experience like within Reade, right? This whole idea of like, well, fuck, like I haven't been really consistent with my story. I don't really have like any hardcore evidence. I don't know if my rapist is serial or not.
Sure. There could be men that see themselves in the position of Biden as well, though, where somebody's made a rape accusation against me. I don't know if anybody's going to believe me. Like,
well, yeah, but the whole idea is that like false rape accusations are like incredibly rare compared to like the amount of people who.
Well, so the numbers that you said were 2 to 10%, right? So 2% would be pretty rare. 10%, that's inflated. Not. Well, you know, no, you don't know that. We know that it's somewhere between probably even less than 2 and probably even more than that. It's somewhere between that. But
the reason why it could be considered inflated is because it's a whole idea of like certain police departments will classify somebody who has like an unfounded rape accusation as the same thing as false. So that's really like problematic, right? Because just
Sure, but
because
then
like
why would you
so
write down
many
2 to 10%? It should just be 2 to 5% or something, right? But even if that number was
um
5% instead of 10%, even 5% is pretty big, and even 2% is like that means 1 out of every 50 rape accusations is just completely fake. That's on the absolute lowest end of your scale. That's still pretty scary, I think.
um yes, but I guess like maybe like this is me being biased or where my priorities lie. Because this is like still like more like rare, like in terms like of odds or probability of it actually happening, and because so little women come out with their story, I would say that we should put like an emphasis first on like trying to get more women to feel comfortable to come out and share their story.
Yeah, but not at the
Because
expense of
otherwise,
like innocently prosecuting men, right?
I mean, that's why I'm not asking like for. That's why I'm like saying like the court of opinion of public opinion is like very different than like an actual court, you know.
Sure.
Um,
I'm just saying, like,
and
this
so
is the
I
exact opposite argument that I'm guessing you and other people give when it comes to things like the death penalty, right? Like, if we execute 1 out of 50 people as an innocent person, then the death penalty is completely immoral. It's not worth the trade-off there. But in this
no.
case, you know, if 1 out of 50 men get, or 1 out of 20 men are, like, improperly accused of rape, well, it's okay there. I don't know if you see a
Um,
difference there.
people are gonna think like I'm a fucking psycho for saying this. The only reason why I'm against like I guess like death penalty in that sense is because what is it? Because it's like extremely like more expensive to have a death penalty than to put the person like in life in prison.
I don't think you
Um,
really believe that, though, no?
well, I kind of like ideally, right? I would want the least time possible.
Well, because what I would
So
ask next is, let's say somebody proposed a way to make the death penalty half the cost. Would you all
wait,
of a
I
sudden?
was gonna
Yeah.
let me
Okay,
finish.
go for it.
So I want like the least time possible. So yeah, like ideally like no death penalty. But if you told me like this is the best way or best way, like this is kind of like the only way that we have for now, to be able to like stop criminals in general. I don't know, like it has to be like some sort of like very extreme situation. Then I'd be like, okay, if like that's the only way, like that's the only way. And I mean like that's why like I think that when it comes to like rape accusations, like the only way we're able to break this like really like huge cycle that keeps these things like perpetually forward, that keeps women from like coming out, is by basically making them feel like more comfortable to come out. And then again, you don't have to say like what I
Well,
said before. You don't
yeah, I
have to say like
understand.
Biden is guilty. You don't have to be like, oh
Yeah,
yeah,
so
you
real
could.
quick, that so you're because you're saying very soft language. You're saying we have to make them feel more comfortable to come out. What you have to say is we have to say that some men are going to be sacrificed on the altar of rape accusations to make other women feel comfortable. That's what we're really saying here, right?
I guess.
Sure. Okay.
There
Well,
was
that's
something I was
important
gonna
because
say.
because you get to emotionally load like your side like really hard. Like, oh, like you don't want women to be afraid. They see their experiences when they're
Well,
getting raped. Blah blah blah.
but
You can't say that. They're
this
like,
is another
well,
thing. I
sure.
feel that. Wait,
Yeah.
sorry. I'm sorry for cutting you
No,
off.
go for it.
This is what I'm trying to say about like Strong Diggers rapists. So you don't have to necessarily say like, oh yeah, I think Biden is 100% guilty. You can definitely take the position of like, oh no, like I'm not sure about what is it? Like I'm not sure about like if there's enough data for me to say like, oh, that he is guilty or not. Like you don't have to take the stance of like, oh no, like all of these innocent men have to be sacrificed. You can definitely take the stance of like, hey, like to me it's not enough data to prosecute, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. Like
That seems like a really strange position, but okay.
yeah, it is a strange position. Like
I don't think anybody would truly ever hold that position. Like if somebody accused like your brother or your father of being a rapist, I don't think anybody in their head is like, I guess he could be, and I'll just live my whole life thinking it could be. I think in our minds we tend to think like he either did or he didn't. Not like, oh, there's a 20. I don't think we think in probabilities that way. That seems like a weird.
Maybe we should, because like we don't have the data to say like, oh yeah, like there's 100% chance this did or like didn't happen or anything.
Sure,
like
but the
that.
problem is that people aren't going to act in probabilities. So, for instance, if you think there's a chance that Biden is a rapist, nobody's going to say, well, I'm going to cast 70% of my vote for Biden because I think there's a 30% chance he's a rapist. Rather, they're going to say, like, well, if there's a chance, I'm never going to vote for that person. That's the problem, is our actions end up being binary, even if we have a probability in our heads.
So yeah, so this was like the counter of like, oh, we should if we do not push a narrative that Reade is probably lying because of lack of evidence and consistency, people might not vote for Biden because of this, right? People might not vote for Biden because, oh, he's a rapist. But then I would argue like, do you think people are actually not going to vote for Biden solely because of this incident, or do you think it's a convenient excuse? Because there's other ways to argue that you should vote for Biden without claiming that Reade is lying, right? So you can cite the fact that lack of repeating cases means that it seems like Biden is like less of a menace than a repeat offender like Trump. You can claim that not voting Biden is a vote for Trump, which means that you're going to be putting like a rapist in office anyways, since inaction is still a form of action. And you can just argue policies in general. You can argue about how, what is it? You can argue like, hey, like you're probably not a single issue voter. It's kind of weird to be a single issue voter. Here's stuff that you should care about, or like things that you should be interested in. And this is why you should vote for Biden.
So I'm curious, would you comfortably vote for Biden right now?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so I think that you can claim like other ways to push people to vote Biden without having the stance that, oh no, like Reade is lying.
I mean, I still think that just like you think you can agree that Biden might be like on a degree of probability or whatever, I think you could also agree that like on the probability level, there's like a 90% chance that Reade is lying, right? We could put that on the other side as well, no?
I don't feel comfortable saying that because of the reasons I said before. Like,
so every single rape accusation should just be treated 100% as true. If somebody came out and accused your dad of rape,
that's why I said not. Wait, that's why I said like, not necessarily like 100% is true. Like you could just take the position of like, I don't know until like there's more evidence, or there's no way to say for certain. But there's a very big distinction between that and claiming the person is lying.
I don't know if I agree with that. I don't think that distinction exists. But maybe for you it does, but I think calling somebody 50-50 chance they raped somebody and just calling somebody a rapist is way closer than saying they are a rapist or they aren't a rapist.
Okay, so I don't know if we're gonna have to like be able to like go through this, because like for me it is this whole idea that like, hey, you know what, like I'm a person who has like a high standard of evidence or whatever. I feel like there's not enough evidence to say like this did happen. I don't feel comfortable making that claim. I think like, hey, when it comes to a person who might be afraid of like coming out with their story, like it's that seems like a lot, I guess, like softer in a sense, or that seems like a lot more reasonable than saying like, oh no, like you're a fucking liar, like you fuck off, you're lying, you don't have enough evidence.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't say that initially. Tara Reade's problem isn't a lack of evidence, it's the faking of evidence and the changing of stories in the past. It's not just a lack of evidence, it's that she's changed her story multiple times in ways that are inexplainable by trauma.
Really?
Yes, really. Saying that you filed a complaint, but it was a sexual harassment, and then later on when they say they're going to release, you're like, okay, well, I didn't put sexual harassment. Like, that's not explainable by trauma. Not at all. Not even close. Not whatsoever. No.
I mean, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I mean, like, I think that, or even in the sense of like what happened or the exact events that occurred, like trauma can fuck up your like memory recollection. It can fuck up like,
and then you remember suddenly when somebody tells you that they can look up the complaint. I don't agree with that. I don't think that's trauma. No, that's just lying. I mean, you're spinning a story.
Did she say that? Yep. How do you call it? She said
she explicitly said initially that her complaint was a sexual harassment complaint, and then after it was stated that they could try to find those complaints, I don't even know if any complaint at all was found, but after it was explicitly stated that they can look for a complaint, she said, okay, well, wait, that complaint didn't mention sexual harassment at all.
But that seems like pretty in line with the whole idea of like Reade not coming fully out with her story before. Like, for example, and I know you don't consider this evidence, but for example, like in the 1996 like divorce papers, where they didn't mention like specifically sexual harassment, they just mentioned trauma in general, or when her mom called Larry King and like talked about trauma in general or something that happened. So like to me, it's like not like, to me, it doesn't sound like a huge like fucking surprise.
Everything can be very, very easily Occam's razor explained by the fact that she's inventing the rape story. To try to make it a trauma thing, there's all sorts of weird trauma that's changing things at different points in time, that's making the story warp and mold, that always benefits like her attacks against Biden consistently. But like all of it, like, you can play trauma if you want, but it's like, it's so perfectly lines up. You would have to like mentally bend your mind in so many different ways to make trauma explanatory of everything.
Well, no, I mean, the whole idea is that like, okay, when people are in denial, like very easy, when people are in denial about what happened to them, they usually don't use like the words that exactly refer to their situation.
So she was traumatized about filing a complaint?
Well, no, maybe she wasn't ready to call it like sexual assault yet. Maybe she just wanted to call it like, oh, like, you know, an incident in the workplace.
Well, then why is it 20 years later she said it was a sexual assault complaint, and then after
because
they said
because it takes time to like freaking process it. It takes time to be able to like come out and like accept what happened to you.
I don't agree that you process everything instantaneously when it becomes like politically expedient for you to do so. I don't believe that she
knows if it happened like earlier, like her, how do you call it? Her brother and her friends like mentioned like, oh no, like 2008 or like even before, like, you know, she like mentioned about this like more like, how do you call it? She mentioned this to us privately. like she like there's you don't know if like she's been like ready for this like for 4 years but didn't feel the need to bring it up, or didn't have like the courage to bring it up until like let's say something after the Me Too movement. Like you don't know
I'm
that.
very comfortable saying she's a liar. I think there's a totality of evidence that points to it. I've never in my life heard of trauma manifesting in such a bizarre fashion, but I guess it's...
You've never heard trauma manifest in ways of like denial and shame?
Denial and shame, yes, but not holding a story consistently over decades and then magically changing everything in multiple stories and who you've told what and the types of complaints you filed in the course of 2 or 3 months. No, never in my life. I've never heard that before.
But this is the whole idea. Like she already said like before, like she went all the way like from freaking January, which by the way, like I was like checking the timeline and yeah, like January, like she had a Medium article out where she said like I haven't come out with the full truth yet. Before January, she contacted Time's Up, Kamala Harris, and like Warren. So this was like way before Joe Biden.
She didn't. The record of her contacting.
I literally checked that on like Wikipedia.
So did I. You can go check it if you want. She claims she contacted them, but Kamala Harris and I believe Warren's campaign didn't respond for comment, and Kamala Harris's director of her attempt to run or whatever said that they'd never received a complaint. You can look that up right now also if you think I'm making that up, but or maybe my story was wrong.
I just remember like the whole idea of like, okay, like she's put in the Medium article, like in, how do you call it, that she hasn't gone like out with her full story on January, and that was after she contacted Time's Up, which means that she contacted Time's Up and theoretically speaking like Kamala and Warren's campaign.
Yeah, she went to Time's
January.
Up. Yeah, she went to Time's Up after every other campaign ignored her requests or didn't contact her back, or she never contacted them because no other campaign seems to acknowledge that she contacted them.
Okay. At least I would have to like check that out. Like if you
wait, real quick. Can you give me the article that you're referencing that says that she contacted the other campaigns?
Yeah.
Tara Reade contacts campaigns. I'll see it maybe because it might be the article that I read. Maybe it was not.
Here. This isn't, what is it? This isn't reference a specific article, but I can send you everything I had so far.
Sure. Here, I'm just linking this Axios article real quick. So Sabrina Singh, a senior advisor to Kamala Harris, told Axios, "We have no record of any request." Elizabeth Warren on Monday called Biden's comments in response to Reade's allegations credible and convincing, that Biden's comments were credible and convincing. I haven't found any evidence that Reade actually reached out to any of these campaigns. I don't know if that's true or not.
Okay. If, out of curiosity, if Reade like sent like, I don't know, like a sent email or something and like posted it like publicly, would you like change your mind about that? Or
well, I don't think her contact number are that important. I don't know if that ever even happened.
Okay.
Whether she did or didn't, I don't think is that important. But it's just another thing in a long list of lies that she's told, apparently. Like, recently, now it's come up that apparently she even lied about having an undergrad, which is kind of strange. But
yeah. There's something I was going to say. Fuck. It was about the Time's Up thing. I mean, either way, like, the whole idea is that, like, she contacted, at the very least, we can say that she contacted Time's Up before January. Which is like way before we got to the point we are right now with like Biden being the nominee.
Okay.
So like the whole idea that like, oh, she just like came out with it like now that he's the nominee, like for what is it, like for political gain or whatever, like that's not necessarily true. Like,
well, my understanding is that even if she contacted Time's Up in January, even if she did, first of all, can you link me that? My understanding is that when she contacted them, she had nothing to say about a sexual assault case.
Will you laugh at me for Wikipedia?
Nope, I don't care. Because I can just click the article through on Wikipedia.
Cool. Here we go.
Okay, Control F. Where does it mention Time's Up in here?
If you go to allegation, the second paragraph.
So Reade had contacted Time's Up Legal Defense Fund seeking legal and public relations support in an effort to get her story out in a safe way. So even at this point, we don't know if she actually went to them and said she got raped. So we don't actually know that. To my understanding, the first time she's ever made that accusation was in March, privately or publicly.
I mean, privately, like her brother said, and like her friend said that she did mention sexual assault. But
no,
either way,
they both changed their story to what they told reporters until after March to match Tara Reade's. So
yeah, which I think, like, honestly, like, to me, I know that to you that sounds like terrible or whatever, and you were even like saying like before, like, oh yeah, nobody should believe you if you do that. But to me, like, it makes absolute sense if like your trauma victim or the person you know is like, I'm not ready to say the full thing.
The problem with your method right here is every single thing she does could make sense. Like, she could come out and say 5 other men raped her in Biden's office, and your response would be, yeah, well, it makes sense that she would have blocked that trauma out, and she didn't want to report on those other 5 men because she was worried about the backlash, and now she is. Or she could come out and she could say, Biden actually raped me in a fighter jet, and you would say, well, I mean, like, sometimes you get raped, it can mess your memory up, like, maybe it was a different type of plane and she didn't remember it, maybe they weren't flying, like, it's hard to say when you're raped, it boggles your memory. You could, like, totally block it out and, like, fill it in. Like, I could literally invent any claim right now, and you would say trauma explains all of it. Like, when something explains everything, it explains nothing, right?
Okay. I feel like there's a very big difference between, like, you know, theoretical, like, I guess, like, a very, like, highly, like, improbable thing to happen.
Yes. What you've been talking about so far is highly improbable, bordering on impossible, or at the very least, it's not explanatory, only using trauma.
Wait, what do you mean not explanatory, only using
trauma? Doesn't allow you to maintain a consistent story that you tell in your personal and public life for 16 years and then change it instantly in the course of a couple months, and now everything is true.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It wasn't just instantly in the course of a couple of months from, like, what I've seen. It, like, she could have been, like, kind of, like, ready to go. Well, now we have to, like, find out, like, specifically what she was gonna tell Time's Up, because you're claiming, like, oh no, she wasn't telling them about the specific rape. Because, like, for all we know, like, privately, like, she kind of came to terms to it, like, for who knows how many years, but it was only until, like, he was, like, a presidential, like, nominee or candidate that she decided to come out with it. And then I know you're gonna say, like, hey, like, why didn't she come out when, like, he was, like, running for, when he was, like, a VP? But at the same time, like, I could just throw back at you, like, hey, you know what, like, things have changed since then. Specifically, like, the Me Too movement, like, freaking exploded. So yeah, is a probability that, like, between that time that he was VP and now, she was able to come to terms with it. Which
but the Me Too movement was, like, started in 2017. Like, why wouldn't she come out then? Like,
well, that's the whole idea. Like, maybe, like, she felt like there was no reason to come out necessarily until he like potentially got into a position of, like, higher power now. Does that make sense?
Well, everything makes sense when you say trauma can explain literally every single possible human behavior, which is the position you've taken. So yes, everything makes sense in your theory, right?
Well, no, I'm asking you, like, if it makes.
Yeah, everything makes sense because trauma explains everything. It explains why you would wait 5 years or 1 year or 20 years. Trauma
like accounts for the whole idea of, like, not being consistent in your story. I'm not
saying, after, like, 15 years of consistency. No, that doesn't sound like trauma. No.
I don't know. Like, okay.
A much better explanation, if we wanted to run the trauma route, a much better explanation would be, it seems like what could have been actually traumatic was what she experienced with her husband. That was so bad she had to change her name. Maybe after that, she started to, like, invent stories about other interactions she's had with men because she was so traumatized by that. I could use trauma to explain that and say all of her accusations might be fake just because she hates men after the trauma she experienced with her husband. It was so bad she had to change her name and move states and get in, like, witness protection for it. Like,
I mean, like, we're talking about, like, simple concepts that happen, like, right afterwards when it comes to
your concept is not simple.
Avoidance,
denial, like, for 18 years and then putting everything together in a few months.
It might have not been 18 years, Destiny. It might have not been fucking 18 years. It might have already been, like, a good, like, decent portion of time after, like, freaking Me Too movement. We don't have, like, a exact schedule when she came to terms to it. We only had an exact schedule of, like, when she decided to go public with it, and that's, like, 2 very different things.
The problem is that we had reporters that had talked to her in 2019 and she hadn't been making any type of sexual assault claim. So it was literally, like, 16 years of consistent story, and then it all changed in 2020.
Okay.
It's not like it changed maybe in 2000 and it wasn't reported, or, like, she was gradually changing over time. It was, like, literally these people were talking to her in, like, 2019.
Yeah, and she constantly, like, at least, like, from what I read back and forth, she never, like, claimed, like, rape outright, but she did talk about, like, oh, you know, feeling, like, sexually harassed.
No,
like,
she explicitly said it was not sexual in nature.
Okay.
So I'm quoting from the Vox article. Reade told me that she wanted me to think of this story as being about abuse of power and then, quote, but not sexual misconduct. And then she said another quote, this is not a story about sexual misconduct. It is a story about abuse of power. It is a story when a member of Congress allows staff to threaten or belittle or bully on their behalf unchecked to maintain power rather than modify behavior.
Is that the one? Is that, how do you call it? Did she give that quote after being talked about like feeling like she was like a lampshade or something?
Possibly, because I think that's the original story in April 2019. That was the story that she was running with.
Okay. So, you know, like, it's to me, it's like pretty crazy. Like, I think like it shows, I know you're gonna laugh at me or whatever. Like, that to me is like one of like the clearest examples of like how trauma like can fuck you up. Because if you're telling me that let me finish. If you're telling me like, oh yeah, you feel like a fucking like lampshade, like he's like mentioning like your sexy legs and stuff, and that doesn't feel like sexual harassment, it's just like a power thing, then yeah, like that's like a clear contradiction that you're like trying to like sort out in your fucking brain.
16 years later. And then you sort it all out over the next few months. But 16 years wasn't enough time. But then in the next like 6 to 8 months, then you sort it all out.
Another thing, like trauma isn't like a linear pathway. It isn't just like, oh, I get there and like now I'm there, or like I'm over it and now I've accepted it. It's something that goes like constantly back and forth. So it's this whole idea that you're like, okay, like you can literally have like a couple of months where you accept what happened to you, and then something else happens, and then suddenly you doubt your experience, or you don't feel comfortable saying it anymore, and you're like, okay, no, like this is bullshit, like it never happened to me, and you're back in denial. Like, we don't know like how she has like responded like through the past 16 years, like privately.
Of course. I wouldn't say 100% she's a liar. I'd say like 98% she's a liar. Like, okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a 2% chance that maybe she had like the most bizarre experience with trauma in the history of any person on the planet.
It's not bizarre. It's normal for people to go back and forth.
It's not normal for people to not be able to process something for 16 years and then to put together a whole different experience in a few months about it.
We don't know like how her like private life exactly was. Like, we don't know like if she like went like fucking back and forth like with her friends.
I mean, we know that like in 2016 she literally like supported Biden. I think in 2017 she supported Biden. So at the very least she hadn't figured it out until then. So maybe it was just in 2018, 2019. Like, well,
yeah, it's this idea that like, again, like you fucking go back and forth. So you can be like, oh yeah, like you can be in denial about like what a person did to you and even claim like they're a fucking good person. And then like, you can have like months where you just like absolutely fucking hate the person.
So here is Tara Reade on Joe Biden. November 2016. Tara Reade liked an Obama tweet calling Joe Biden the best VP and friend I could have had alongside me. February 2017. Tara Reade retweeted support of Joe Biden for action he's taken to help end sexual assault. March 2017. Tara Reade tells her Twitter followers that they should listen to Joe Biden because he speaks truth. April 2017, Tara Reade liked a Huffington Post article praising Joe Biden for reminding men how important they are in the fight against sexual assault and for telling other men to speak out about sexual assault. April 2019, in an article she wrote, Tara Reade alleges she was bullied and touched inappropriately by Joe Biden, but acknowledges that her story with Biden was not about sexual misconduct. And then March 2020, Tara Reade claims Joe Biden sexually assaulted her in 1993.
Yeah, like I guess like I don't know what else to tell you. Like I'm like trying to like repeat myself over and over. Like, to you, like this seems like super like fucking like incredulous and like ridiculous about like going like back and forth, and like we don't know like how her private life is and how it's totally possible to be like, oh yeah, like my abuser was like a good person, like they never did anything wrong, to then being like, no, like they're fucking horrible people. Like,
well, but we already know that something bad happened. Because we know that she complained to her mom about stuff that had happened in the office, and we know that she complained to her husband that something bad in the office happened because of the divorce papers, right? So clearly at one point in her life earlier, she knew that something fucked up had happened. It just doesn't seem like it had anything to do with sexual assault with Joe Biden.
I mean, that's
Or are you saying she processed it and she knew it was bad then, but then she went back 5 years later and now she wasn't sure it was bad, and then for multiple years she held that it was bad, and now she's back thinking it's bad again?
Oh, yes. I think we get it. Except like It could be like a span of like months back and forth.
Sure. Can you give me a single possible thing that she could say that would be surprising to you that you wouldn't just say trauma explains it? One possible thing she could say.
I don't know. I think like the idea of like if she claims that, how do you call it, she was like what you mentioned like before, like, oh no, like actually she was like raped like multiple times, like by
really
multiple
you don't think you'd say, well actually they remember the senator, or I remember the staffers that were talking about the creep list, remember the fact that Biden was friends with Epstein and there were women being raped and she was traumatized by her it could be that she was raped by multiple people. You would instantly say if she said that it was a gang rape?
I think how do you call it? I think it could be potentially possible. I don't know if I would say like I would like that I can like make a 100% claim of whether I believe her or not.
Okay,
which is
what
where
if
like we go back to like the fucking Schrodinger's like fucking rapist.
Sure. What if Tara Reade came out now and said, okay, I misremembered, like I don't think he actually raped me? What if she said that now?
I like that's what I was like trying to talk about before. Like I don't know if she'd like be back like in a period of denial, or if like she's like if she maybe if she openly admitted like, oh yeah, like no, I lied. Like this was like,
So even
you
if
know, to
she
fuck
herself,
if she says like, oh yeah, it was like a lie to like fuck him up, then yeah, I would be like, okay, she's like a liar. She admitted that she just did this like as a political career move or whatever. Like that's fucked up. If she's like, oh no, like, you know, it wasn't like what she like basically the fucking quote before, like, oh no, it wasn't sexual assault, it was about power, despite the fact that like all of my like references about that before were about like being objectified like an object, and like, you know, being touched inappropriately, which like literally by definition is like basically like sexual assault, or like falls under the whole category of like sexual harassment. So like it really depends on like what her statement is, long story short.
so the only thing that would change your mind is if she came out and was like, well, okay, I did this only for political gain. I am of sound mind. A psychologist evaluated me before I made this public statement. Joe Biden did not like rape me or touch me in any inappropriate way like that, and blah blah blah. It would take a statement of that magnitude for you to finally be like, oh, okay, I don't think you raped her.
As of now, I think so. But
Okay.
anyways, like I like, how do you call it? I do admit that she has like credibility problems when it comes to like keeping a consistent story. So I don't blame other people for saying like, hey, you know what? Like I have a high bar when it comes to this. It doesn't meet it.
Sure.
Like,
I mean,
period.
there's
Like,
more
it doesn't
evidence for
fucking
like
meet it.
9/11 truther movements at this point than Tara Reade's rape accusation. There's more evidence for literally almost every that the moon landing was fake than there are for Tara Reade's like story at the moment. But if you want to believe it, like you can. But like you're
Okay,
literally
there's
engaging in
something I was gonna say
hardcore
before.
conspiracy theory. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's a fucking hardcore conspiracy theory to say like, hey, you know what? Like this is actually, because this is something that fucking happens in real life. Maybe not like, oh, maybe like it's not in the realm of politics, but there's women who are raped who don't have like fucking clear evidence, who like do like go back and forth in like parts of like denial and acceptance, and who don't have consistent stories. And I think like as long as there's women like this that exist, who might be like fucking afraid to come out because of like what's happening to Tara Reade right now, like we have to like keep that in consideration when it comes to her rhetoric. So yeah, I think like in the long term, like if we keep like being like, oh no, like Tara Reade's like a fucking liar because like she's not like consistent, or like Tara Reade is like fucking like, you know, lying because like there's not enough like hardcore evidence, then what does that say to like women who are in a similar position as she is, but you know, it's just not political at that point?
Well,
Like,
what does it say to men?
you're basically
You
fucked.
can make an argument in the opposite too. Like, holy shit! Like, if this was the new standard for being men, like, I would never hire a woman in my office ever. Fuck that. I would just say no fucking women are allowed.
But
If
I
somebody
mean,
could
like,
make a
the
rape
point is-
accusation against me, and somebody like you is going to say trauma, trauma, trauma to explain every single thing, I would never fucking work with a woman again ever. Holy
Well,
shit!
okay,
Why would I risk that? Holy fuck!
Here's a couple of things, right? And that's why we go back to like the amount of like false accusations are extremely rare.
I don't
Or why
care.
you
It's
can
not
take
worth
the
it. Even if it's
stance-
2%,
or
I would
why-
never
or
risk
why
it.
You can take the fucking stance of like, hey, like I'm not sure, like I can't make like a full statement of like whether the person's like fucking lying or not. Okay,
Sure.
like.
But the
That's why
easiest
you
way,
can
if you were a
take that
man,
stance.
you would be incredibly fucking stupid to have anything to do with a woman in this type of position, when a false rape accusation should always be treated as though it's true and there's no threshold of
Well,
evidence required ever. You should just not work with them. That would be my public encouragement. That is what I'm saying right now, is that if people are going to treat Tara Reade's story as highly credible, or that we should definitely believe her, there's like a 50-50
I
chance
never
about
said
it,
it's highly
then you should.
credible. But
Okay,
anyways,
but
I'm-
no,
I'm-
you said that you are more likely to believe her than Biden at this point. So you think it's at least 51% true, right? And I would say that if a lot of people shared your point of view, that we should absolutely minimize the number of women working in any jobs related to dealing with powerful men, because I don't want to risk like credible figures being taken down by fake rape accusations. Even if it's just one, when we're talking about like presidential nominees, holy shit, that's a huge fucking deal. That's really horrible. Even 1 in 50 is
this
huge.
This is why I'm saying that you can like fucking take the stance of like literally like Schrodinger's rapist or whatever. You can say like, hey,
No.
like I'm not 100%
You
sure
can't
this
say
happened. It
that.
doesn't- what do
Nobody
you mean you
accepts
can't
that.
say that?
If you were
Things
in
are,
a
like,
relationship with somebody and you asked them, do you think I cheated on you? And they were like, I don't think you did. I'm like 20% sure. Then your relationship is over. If your mom or dad came up to you and they were like, do you think that you're a secret adopted child, or that I raped or killed your mom or something, or something horrible happened? You're like, I'm like 35%. No, that's not any. They would hate you, or they would never talk to you again. People in real life don't hold opinions like this. Like, you either consider somebody like a rapist or a probable rapist. That's still like 90 to 100 on the bad scale, or not a rapist. Nobody thinks that there's like, oh, that guy, you know, he's like 10% chance a rapist, but otherwise I'm pretty cool with him. People don't think like that about anybody ever.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't think like most people think. I don't know what else to say. Like,
I don't know how you would
Okay.
interact with somebody who you think is like 20% a rapist. That seems like a really fucking weird position to like have in your head of somebody.
well, I think like, okay, like, is this enough for like evidence to like push me over the edge? Like, is it not? I don't know what else to say. Like, I literally like think in probabilities. Like, I'm not sure. I guess like I'm fucking crazy. I don't know. I guess I do not think like other people. I don't know what else to say. I don't think we're gonna get anywhere else.
Okay. Well, I understand your point of view. I appreciate that conversation. Do you have any final closing remarks or anything?
Do you have any?
No, I mean, I think it's like pretty clear when you look at the totality of evidence, when you look at the credibility of Tara Reade, when you look at like the totality of accusations, everything against Biden, it's pretty obvious that Tara Reade's accusation is entirely fabricated. That no reasonable person would treat this accusation with any amount of credence whatsoever, unless some groundbreaking like smoking gun or whatever something comes out and is released. Otherwise, it just seems like Tara Reade is lying for either publicity or for political gain.
Okay. And you don't think like. I guess like you don't like value that like the same thing that I do, because I was gonna be like these types of arguments that are made literally stop women from coming forward with their stories like all the fucking time because they see themselves as like that potential like worst case scenario. So like I don't know how.
Then we work on that. But in the meantime, I'm not willing to start.
How do we work on that if every single time like there's a public figure?
It's not every single time. What are you talking about? We just got through a multi-year period where plenty of women were believed about. So, yeah.
I retract my statement.
Okay. Yeah. We just got through a period where lots of women were able to make successful accusations. There are probably even more men that have gone unpunished. But I think we live in a society today where people are trying harder than ever to break these stories. So if you have a real story, it seems like you're pretty encouraged to come out right now. If for no other reason, you see that because of how many other reporters were trying to break Tara Reade's false accusation. There's so many other people that were digging into it to see if there was any merit there. Nobody could find any.
Yeah, but the whole idea is like people don't know if they're rapist or serial or not. People don't know if they're gonna be like the only one who's like fucking like raped by that person or not. So as long as like the story hasn't like fucking broken out yet and you're in a position where you've been raped by X person, like why the fuck would you like ever come out if you don't like have like strong evidence, or if you think like, oh shit, like there's the probability that I'm the only fucking one who went through this with that person.
I mean, maybe you come out anonymously, and then you see if anybody else comes out anonymously. I mean, that's one way you could do it. Maybe you approach some like Democrat in power, like Christine Ford did, and then maybe you see if anybody else is willing to come out that way. I mean, like there are multiple things, there are multiple ways you could approach it, rather than I'm going to do an interview on live TV and talk about my rape accusation. Like, holy shit. Like, to pretend that she did this and she was ultra scared about it when she went about it in the most public she literally went to a law firm for PR before going public with everything.
Well,
like, she didn't even...
how do you call it, law firm that like dealt with legality as well as like public relations, because obviously like this is a public figure. Like she
didn't have to be a public figure she chose to make herself a public figure. Like she could have just as easily went behind the scenes and gone off the record with the New York Times, with WAPO, with Vox and all these other people and started to get like the ball rolling.
Do you think people would make the claim then like, oh no, like she's not as credible because she's like not putting herself out there, like, you know, like this is just like a fucking anonymous claim, it means like nothing?
The problem is that uncredible stories like this, in the way that she's done it, do more to hurt like the Me Too movement than any amount of person that's questioning. It's kind of like when Black Lives Matter holds up a person that is like a shitty representative to be like, okay, like this dude just robbed a fucking store and is like has a fucking gun and like got killed by a cop. Maybe not the best situation. Like, why is this your person? Like, what the fuck? Like, why are you using this as your representative? It's probably not a good story. When you take people like Tara Reade and you try to hold them up as icons of the Me Too movement, when she
I'm not holding her up as an icon of the Me Too movement. I'm saying like, hey, like, you know, I think like going to the extent of being like, oh no, like she's like a fucking liar because like her story isn't like consistent. To me, like that just like screams like, okay, there's a shit ton of women who have been raped who don't have consistent stories. Like what is the message you're sending to them?
Not having a consistent story is perfectly reasonable and is in line with how people process events. Your story might solidify or change a bit over the next few months or maybe even a couple years. The idea that you would have a consistent story for 16 years and change everything in the course of 4 months,
that's the thing. We don't know how she fucking was in private. Like there's a difference between like what we know, like what she publicly
her friends never said that she reported any different story than exactly what they said in January and February and last April when people were looking into it.
Their friends, like, yeah, the friends changed her story, but like the friends also said like, oh no, like this is what actually happened, but she, like we didn't feel like comfortable like giving out like this full thing until she said she was. Like one of her friends literally said like, oh, you shouldn't like say it publicly or you shouldn't come out with it publicly. Okay. Like it's in the article I sent. Yeah, I don't know if. Okay, yeah. So.
Yeah, trauma is a magical, wonderful thing, I guess, that allows us to weave all sorts of narratives. But, yeah, I don't know. Okay, I mean, I guess we just have to agree to disagree. But.
Okay. Well, hope you have a good night.
Okay, I love you. Be careful, buddy. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye. You are ecstatic to watch America let you right now. Yeah, you're like, oh, we can't do anything better. Like you sound you sound so pathetic. How you look at your